Hello Bates faculty, this is Dan Sanford at Writing at Bates. This workshop provides an overview of an approach for designing courses for the fall that takes into account both the uncertainty about what the upcoming academic year will look like and the absolute certainty that at least a significant portion of our teaching this fall will be remote. As you're considering your fall courses, how can you build a syllabus that takes into account the extraordinary circumstances that we and our students are in and even takes advantage of them as a unique educational opportunity? We all had a crash course in remote instruction this spring. What can we learn from it? What did our students have to say about their experiences? This workshop introduces a few core principles that will be developed more fully in other programming throughout the Pedagogy Matters Conference and throughout the summer in other programming. It draws on comments from Bates students in their fall courses and suggests some specific approaches. First, consider universal design. Universal design for learning is about building learning environments from the ground up with the needs of diverse students in mind, rather than designing courses that assume a neurotypical, able-bodied native English speaker and then making accommodations for other types of students. Universal design encourages us to design learning environments from the ground up with different types of learners in mind. For example, if we provide captioning for our lectures, we help out the student who's hard of hearing, but also make it easier for a student who's trying to listen to that lecture while stuck in a small apartment with small children, or who needs to read it at a slower speed because English is not their first language. So one way we can honor universal design is by presenting all of our course materials in ways that assume a broad set of physical and neural abilities. For example, captioning videos and using documents that can be read by screen reader software. In the case of remote learning, a universal design approach also encourages us to think about students who may experience our courses in different ways because of differences in access to technology, living circumstances, or time zone. If we assume a student who's not in this time zone, who has limited access to technology or bandwidth, or who's in a challenging environment for learning, then we can design our courses around the needs of those students, and in the process make them more effective for everyone. For example, we cannot depend on synchronous lectures, which assume everyone has good access to a strong broadband connection and is in a US time zone, but rather present materials asynchronously and provide other ways for students to ask questions, connect, and get the class experience. You might consider avoiding timed assessments, which present difficulties for students who may have deadlines fall at highly inconvenient times of the day, have spotty access to an internet connection, or be competing for computer time with roommates or family members. Build a simple and transparent course structure. One of the most consistent pieces of feedback that we got from students this spring is that they appreciated courses in which the structure of the course and expectations of them were clear, and really struggled when they didn't perceive that to be the case. Students do their best work when they're able to focus on the content of the course, not the structure of the course. How can you create a straightforward class that sets up students for success? One way of doing this is by establishing a consistent, recurring pattern in the course. Every week may be different in terms of content, but a basic template helps students to feel comfortable in the course, even when they're not getting the social feedback that a brick-and-mortar environment can provide. For example, you could have a lecture posting on Monday, a response due in a discussion forum on Wednesday, and a quiz on Friday every week. Or your course might consist of a number of discrete modules, each culminating in an assignment or assessment that demonstrates mastery. Similarly, it's important to set up a plan for communicating expectations and assignments. Frequent communication is essential in remote learning to help students feel connected, but if that communication isn't regular and consistent, then it becomes overwhelming. Communicate at regular, recurring times and formats. For example, a Monday morning email or a Tuesday evening post to the course page, so that students have a clear sense of where to find important information and can plan their weeks accordingly. Foster interaction and cooperation among students. Learning is most effective when it's a social experience, and remote learning does not have to mean learning in isolation. During the pandemic, our students have struggled with isolation, with keeping up motivation, and with their lack of connection to the sense of community that a college campus usually provides. How can your course create a community of learners, with students sharing, collaborating, and debating together? Collaborative learning always offers the advantage of giving students the opportunity to use one another as resources, progressing together towards a deeper understanding of course materials than any one student might attain individually. In a remote course, it also allows students to feel connected, not just to you, but to one another, to experience a sense of cohort and belonging, which is really important to student success in college, even if they're not here physically. Group work is one way to do this. Remember that group projects don't have to be big to be meaningful. If students are working together to define a term or solve a problem, that's wonderful. It doesn't have to be a group presentation or large project. Also recall the relevance of universal design. In setting groups, be sure to consider students in different time zones. We have a lot of tools like Google Docs and discussion forums that allow students to collaborate asynchronously. Those are great to utilize here. Project-based learning is highly relevant here. Consider an interesting, authentic problem in your field of inquiry. How can you have students work collaboratively to solve or address that problem? In the process, working to meet the learning outcomes for your course and mastering disciplinary modes of thinking and writing. For individual projects, consider creating community through peer assessment. Peer review, peer assessment, peer commenting, or any other mode of students seeing and commenting on one another's work provides ways for students to benefit from seeing the approaches other students have taken in responding to the same prompt, to have a real audience for their work, and to feel more connected. Place students in an active role. It can be challenging for students to feel in remote learning environments like they have any agency. At the same time, learning takes place when students engage with, reflect on, practice using, and draw connections among ideas. How can your course create as much time as possible for students to actively engage with the content of your course? The goal is to focus on learning outcomes, having students participate in complex, authentic activities that support these outcomes. The checkpoints for the course and the way that students document their progress can be polished presentations they make speaking to these activities. So much is possible with active learning using web tools, even when students are at home. For example, if I was teaching Geology 101 and had the outcome for students to understand the difference between rocks and minerals, I might have students find examples of rocks and minerals in their immediate environment and use them as images in a short video where they informally explain the difference to a hypothetical friend who isn't in the course. Writing plays a really important role here. When students write about a topic, they flesh it out within their own minds, acquiring a deeper understanding of it. Consider how you can use writing not to assess what students have learned, but as an active learning task. Short, frequent, informal prompts that encourage students to grapple with challenging ideas in your course inherently place students in an active role, shifting the focus from passively absorbing information to proactively utilizing it. Similarly, your assessments themselves can be learning opportunities. We've talked about how timed assessments that replicate in-class quizzes and exams are problematic from a universal design perspective. Shifting towards untimed, open note assessments makes assessments more equitable, and it also allows your assessments to work as opportunities for active learning, with students working through their notes and readings to respond to complex questions. Create a connection with your students. Students spoke in addressing their learning experiences this spring to feelings of deep isolation that were crippling for them as learners. Learning is social, and it's very hard for students to maintain motivation and purpose when that aspect is removed. The connections that students build with faculty members is one of the signature aspects of a Bates education, and these connections are no less possible in digital spaces. What are the opportunities in your courses to create and maintain connections with your students? All of our students always have the opportunity to seek us out, but often the students who are most struggling or who are from vulnerable populations are precisely the ones who are least likely to do that. In a remote learning scenario, feelings of isolation or being overwhelmed can really heighten this. It's incumbent on us to create connections with our students rather than waiting for them to come to us. For example, you could make a point of sending an individual email checking in with students at a few points during the semester, or you could schedule short individual conferences with your students. In these times, a student falling behind in a course is very likely to be a signal of ways they're being directly affected by the pandemic, either in their own physical health or those of their loved ones, their mental health or those of their loved ones, stress, anxiety, or living circumstances. It's on us to be proactive in monitoring students' activity and in reaching out to students who aren't engaging. Perhaps the easiest way to build in more opportunities for connection is to break up large, formal assignments into smaller, less formal ones that give us more opportunities to provide formative feedback to students. For example, in building up to a large research paper due at the end of the semester, students might create a number of short, informal pieces of writing that allow them to explore ideas in a scenario where the stakes aren't as high, and allow you to check in on students thinking about course concepts at a stage where it can still make a difference to the final product. We get the chance to make a real difference in our students' lives. That's never been more true than it is right now. We have the advantage of amazing students, relatively small class sizes, and deep experience as pedagogues committed to connection and mentorship. Adjusting to remote learning is a commitment, and it takes time, but it's not a divergence from great teaching. The things that we can do to make our courses more effective for remote learners are also opportunities to make our courses more effective, impactful, and equitable for all students. Thank you, and please feel free to send us a message at writing@bates.edu to explore how these ideas apply in your courses.